For years, he called me his anchor. We built departments, rescued projects, and navigated crises so quietly that people often assumed we worked by instinct alone. He trusted my judgment, and I trusted his guidance. Nothing dramatic. Nothing forced. It was the kind of professional bond that survives long nights, shifting budgets, and leadership storms. Then one morning the rhythm changed. A weekly review disappeared from my calendar. A message I sent received no reply. Another reminder was left unread. I assumed he was overwhelmed, something he often admitted privately. Yet the silence grew until it felt deliberate. Meetings where my presence had always been expected moved forward without me. Introductions I normally handled were suddenly reassigned. No confrontation ever took place. No conversation explained the shift. The absence arrived quietly, like a door closing without sound. I watched familiar responsibilities slide away as if someone was erasing my name from a routine they no longer wished to remember. It was not anger that struck me. It was the realization that decisions affecting my work were being made without a single word exchanged. Then the younger hire appeared. Fresh enthusiasm, bright smiles, loud introductions. She was placed beside him as if she had always been part of the strategy. People adjusted quickly, almost grateful for the distraction of novelty. I stood there, not dismissed and not included, positioned in a strange middle ground where history still existed but relevance was being rewritten in real time. That is when I understood the truth. The relationship had not ended emotionally. It had ended administratively, with silence doing the work that honesty avoided. The younger hire did not arrive quietly. Her introduction spread through the office with a kind of practiced excitement that leadership reserves for moments meant to signal progress. She was described with impressive phrases, each one polished enough to sound official. People repeated them as if they were facts, even when no one had seen her work long enough to confirm anything. I watched the tone around her shift week by week. Meetings that once centered on measurable results now opened with commentary about energy and freshness. Reports were praised before they were read. Observations that required context were treated as vision. Her presence became a performance the organization wanted to applaud, and applause often replaced evaluation. Through all of this, I stayed exactly where I had always been, completing the work that kept operations stable. No resentment, no rivalry, only observation. I wrote down every change, not to defend myself, but to understand how easily experience can be recast as background noise when people prefer the brightness of novelty. Decisions began drifting. Solutions I had shaped for months were reviewed through lenses that valued presentation more than understanding. She spoke confidently about problems she had never seen, and her confidence was accepted as proof of competence. I recognized the pattern instantly. Many people over 50 have lived it more than once. It is the quiet substitution of substance with optics. It is the belief that youth automatically signals innovation. I did not argue. I documented. Patterns reveal themselves faster when you stop participating in the noise around them. What I saw was not her rise. It was the organization training itself to ignore depth in favor of display. The audience always recognizes that shift because they have witnessed it too. The shift began so quietly that I almost missed it. A system notification appeared one morning stating that my clearance for a shared drive had expired. It felt like an error, something temporary, but the message stayed. Later, a meeting I had prepared for all week moved forward without my contribution. I saw the update in the recap, a simple note summarizing decisions I once shaped directly. The transition felt subtle, almost polite, yet unmistakable. Days later, the influence I built over years thinned further. Questions about strategy went to colleagues who once relied on me for direction. Invitations to planning sessions disappeared one by one. No explanation arrived. No conversation took place. The absence of dialogue made the shift feel colder than dismissal. It was removal by quiet omission. There was no HR meeting. No statement of dissatisfaction. Just a gradual redirection of information away from my desk. I understood the pattern. Modern organizations often avoid confrontation, preferring to shrink a person's role until they either leave or accept invisibility. It is an unspoken tactic that allows leadership to claim nothing happened while everyone feels the truth. I watched my position fade in real time. The work continued around me as if I had stepped into a different timeline where I still existed but carried no weight. People nodded politely, yet their decisions no longer required my insight. It was an erosion of identity conducted with administrative precision. For many professionals over 50, this moment is familiar. Removal without announcement. Exclusion without conflict. A slow rewriting of relevance carried out through silence rather than courage. The turning point arrived on an ordinary afternoon. A manager stopped by my desk with a polite request for a quick review of a routine summary. It looked harmless, just a short draft intended for internal alignment. I opened it expecting a simple edit, yet within the first paragraphs, I felt something shift. The language did not match the reality I had lived. Achievements I had shaped were reframed as collective efforts guided by others. Strategic decisions I once led were presented as spontaneous insights from newer voices. I read further and found that key moments in our department's progress were softened to the point of erasure. Timelines were adjusted. Responsibilities blurred. The narrative suggested that my mentor had single-handedly shaped initiatives he had once asked me to rescue quietly behind the scenes. It was not malicious on the surface. It was calculated in its subtlety. I understood immediately that this document was part of a larger preparation. Someone was rewriting history before presenting it upward. They were shaping a version of events that would make future decisions seem natural rather than abrupt. It was not personal resentment. It was administrative positioning. The realization hit with clarity. This was not a careless mistake. It was a strategic adjustment of the past designed to define the future. Reading it felt like watching the floor shift beneath me while the room pretended to remain still. In that moment, I saw the full picture. They were not waiting to replace me. They had already begun rewriting the story to prove I had never been central to it. That document revealed the truth more clearly than any meeting ever could. I returned to the document with a level of calm that surprised even me. There was no anger left, only clarity. If they wished to reshape the narrative, then the narrative deserved precision. I began by reviewing every line slowly, listening for gaps between intention and fact. I did not correct anything emotionally. I corrected it structurally. I replaced vague descriptions with specific outcomes. I aligned achievements with their real timelines. I restored attributions exactly as they had occurred, but without inserting my name. It was not necessary. Events speak for themselves when placed in the right order. I adjusted phrasing with care. A sentence that once blurred responsibility became a clear sequence of actions with measurable impact. A passage that suggested effortless progress evolved into a description of coordinated work carried out across multiple teams. Definitions once used loosely tightened into accurate descriptions. Nothing was exaggerated. Nothing was softened. Everything remained factual. What made the transformation powerful was its restraint. I did not highlight omissions. I did not expose inconsistencies. I simply allowed the original intentions to lead naturally into the truth. Their words, once polished for optics, now revealed the structure behind the achievements they hoped to reassign. When I finished, the document read differently. The story no longer elevated personalities. It elevated processes. It reminded the reader that progress is built on continuity, not novelty. I handed it back without comment, knowing the weight of accuracy would move faster through the organization than any emotional explanation ever could. In that moment, I understood the value of silence. Precision carries more authority than confrontation, especially when people believe they are controlling the narrative. The letter moved through the organization slowly at first, appearing in executive inboxes where it was read with the detached attention reserved for routine updates. Then something unexpected happened. People read it twice. Details that once seemed ordinary now carried weight. Timelines aligned perfectly. Achievements were documented with such clarity that questions formed without accusation. The tone was calm, yet it revealed a structure many had forgotten existed. Board members reacted with a mix of curiosity and unease. They requested access to previous reports for comparison. Legal teams reread sections to ensure compliance, not because they sensed wrongdoing, but because the accuracy felt sharper than usual. Meetings that normally ended quickly extended into longer discussions. No one raised their voice. No one hinted at conflict. It was the kind of discomfort that arrives when truth stands quietly in the room. My mentor felt the shift before anyone spoke to him directly. He sensed the change in posture during calls. He noticed delays in approvals that once moved instantly. He realized that the younger hire no longer appeared as central as before. The story he had quietly shaped around himself was no longer holding. Not because someone challenged him, but because the letter illuminated the landscape he had hoped to edit. There was no explosion, no dramatic confrontation. The organization simply adjusted its understanding. Accuracy corrected assumptions. Facts realigned loyalty. Silence reshaped influence. The letter did what voices had not been allowed to do. In the end, the reaction revealed one truth. Systems respond more deeply to clarity than to noise, and clarity has a way of returning to those who respect it. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in the department settled into a strange quiet. Nothing dramatic happened, yet subtle shifts formed new contours around daily operations. The younger hire, once introduced with excitement, began to struggle with responsibilities that required more depth than presentation. Her confidence remained bright, but the gaps between expectation and execution widened. People noticed, though no one said anything directly. The applause that had surrounded her arrival softened into polite patience. My mentor felt a parallel change. His influence narrowed without confrontation. Approvals that once passed through him automatically now required additional oversight. Decision-making moved to committees. Conversations that once began with his perspective now opened with requests for data. It was not a fall. It was a quiet recalibration of authority. No scandal. No accusations. Only a recognition that structure needed balance again. Interestingly, no one blamed the letter. They blamed timing. They blamed market pressure. They blamed alignment challenges that had been whispered about long before. The organization chose explanations that protected pride rather than truth, and I allowed them to keep those narratives. Silence can be a form of dignity when the outcome speaks clearly. Throughout this period, I said nothing. I did my work with the same steadiness I had always maintained, watching the system correct itself naturally. Experience rarely needs to defend itself. It simply waits until circumstances reveal what ambition tried to hide. By the time the dust settled, the landscape looked different from every direction. Nothing explosive had occurred, yet everything had changed. If you are over 50, you already understand the value of quiet endurance. Experience does not demand the room. It stabilizes it. You have lived long enough to see how quickly organizations chase novelty and how quickly they later search for the wisdom they set aside. Your strength is not volume. It is perspective shaped by years of watching patterns repeat themselves in different packaging. When people try to erase you from the story, resist the urge to argue. Let structure finish the sentence. Records outlast enthusiasm. Accuracy survives ambition. Documentation has a way of revealing the truth long after speeches fade. You do not need to fight for recognition when the work itself carries your signature in every outcome it influenced. Do not measure your worth by how loudly others promote themselves. Measure it by the stability you bring to systems that collapse without quiet leadership. Your judgment cannot be replaced by excitement. Your insight cannot be duplicated by charm. What you have built over decades cannot be erased by a single moment of disregard. Move with clarity. Move with patience. Move with the confidence of someone who has already seen how temporary noise becomes when reality returns. Protect your work through documentation and integrity, not confrontation. The world eventually circles back to the people who understand how things truly function. And remember this final truth. Hype will always fade. Records will always remain. The professionals who survive and thrive are the ones who trust the long arc of experience more than the short pulse of attention.